You are standing on a bare hill and the wind is very old. It is coming off a wide, dry, rolling country, low hills the color of a lion's hide, stretching away in every direction under an enormous sky. There are no trees to speak of, no houses, no roads, just the grass bleached pale gold, hissing softly as the wind combs through it, and the great empty land rolling away to a horizon so far off it seems to belong to another world. You are on the highest point for miles. Behind you the land falls away in long, slow folds. And beneath your feet, though you cannot see it yet, though no one will see it for a very, very long time, beneath your feet there is something buried, something enormous, something so old that when you finally understand how old, the number will not quite fit inside your head. Welcome back. And if this is your first night here, then settle in. You have come to exactly the right hill. Before we go down into what is buried here, do the small thing that keeps these journeys alive. Tap subscribe and leave one comment before your eyes grow heavy where you are, what hour it is, what you are drinking tonight. I read them all in the mornings. Now dim whatever light is still on and let the room go soft and deep, because tonight we are going to dig slowly into a hill that quietly broke history. Let me tell you the story you were taught, because tonight we are going to watch it break. You were taught, more or less, that civilization began like this. First, long ago, human beings were wanderers, hunters, gatherers, small bands following the animals and the season, never staying anywhere, never building anything, too busy simply surviving. And then the story goes, came the great change. People learned to farm. They planted the first seeds, tamed the first animals, and for the first time in the history of our kind, they could stay in one place. And because they could stay, they built villages, and the villages became towns, and the towns became cities. And once there were cities, once there was surplus and leisure and people freed from the endless hunt, only then, at the very end of that long climb, could humanity afford the luxuries of the settled world. Art, religion, temples, the great monuments, that was the order of it you were taught. First the farm, then the town, then the temple, bread first, then gods. It is a clean and sensible story, and it makes perfect sense, and nearly everyone believed it for a very long time. Survival first, cathedrals last. You do not carve great monuments to your gods until you have first solved the problem of dinner. Hold that story in your mind gently as you lie here. First the farm, then the temple. Remember it, because underneath this bare and windy hill beneath your feet, there is something that says it is wrong. Something that says it happened the other way around. Something so old and so impossible that when it was finally uncovered, it did not just add a chapter to the story of how civilization began. It tore the first page out and made everyone start again. The hill is called Göbekli Tepe. In the language of the country, it means, roughly, the hill with a belly, the Potbelly Hill, because of its round, swollen shape against the flat land. It sits in the far southeast of what is now Turkey, in ancient country near the headwaters of great rivers, in the very cradle where so much of our history is supposed to have begun. For thousands of years, shepherds grazed their flocks over it and knew nothing. Farmers plowed its lower slopes and turned up strange broken stones and thought nothing of them. It was just a hill, the highest, barest, emptiest hill around, and beneath it, waiting in the dark under the grass and the dust of 120 centuries, stood a temple older than farming, older than the wheel, older than writing, older than metal, older than the first city anywhere on earth. A temple built by the very hunter-gatherers who, according to the story you were taught, could not possibly have built anything at all. Tonight we are going to dig it up slowly, gently, the way it was really dug up, one careful layer at a time. We are going to stand among its great stones and meet the strange carved creatures on them, and ask who raised them and how, and above all why a band of wandering hunters 12,000 years ago would move mountains of stone to build a thing that broke every rule about the order in which our kind was supposed to become itself. You will not need to remember any of it. You are only here to be carried down into the hill and down into sleep. So take a slow breath, in and out longer than you took it. And let us begin where it really began, not 12,000 years ago, but only a few decades back, with one tired archaeologist on this very hill about to make the mistake that would become the greatest discovery of his life. For as long as anyone could remember, Göbekli Tepe was a hill you walked past. The people of the nearby villages knew it, of course. It was the high place, the bare place, good for grazing and little else. There was a solitary mulberry tree near the top, old and wind-shaped, that the local people held to be a wishing tree, and they would tie small strips of cloth to its branches, and it stood its lonely vigil over the empty hill for longer than anyone could say. The flocks moved over the slopes, the wind moved over the grass, and the hill kept its enormous secret patiently, the way it had kept it for 12,000 years. The farmers who worked the lower ground knew the hill had stones in it. Their plows found them big blocks of limestone, sometimes worked, sometimes carved, that got in the way of the fields. And they did what farmers everywhere do with stones that get in the way. They pulled them out and broke them up and cleared them and cursed them and went on with the plowing. Some of the great pillars we will meet tonight bear the marks of that, cracks and breaks from farm tools, from people who had no idea that the awkward stones fouling their fields were the tallest and oldest carved monuments on the face of the earth. And even the experts walked past. In the 1960s, a survey came through the region, scholars from far away, cataloging the ancient sites of that rich and storied land. They climbed the Potbelly Hill. They saw the broken limestone slabs scattered over its surface. And they wrote it down and they moved on because they came to the sensible, obvious, completely wrong conclusion. They decided the hill was probably a medieval cemetery, a graveyard a few hundred years old, some abandoned burial ground, nothing remarkable, not worth the digging. They noted it and they left, and the hill went back to sleep for another 30 years, its true age off by a factor of 40, dismissed, overlooked, walked past one more time. There is something almost unbearable in that, and something wonderful too. The single most important archaeological site of its kind on Earth, a thing that would rewrite the story of who we are, sat there, cataloged, visited, noted, and misunderstood, for decades under a wishing tree in the middle of ordinary fields, while the world passed it by. The greatest secret does not always hide in some remote and guarded place. Sometimes it lies in plain sight on the highest hill, where everyone can see it and no one thinks to look. It would take one man, one particular archaeologist, coming to that hill in the mid-1990s with a lifetime of experience and a willingness to be surprised, to stop and look again, and understand what he was standing on. His name was Klaus Schmidt, and when he came to the Potbelly Hill, everything about the story you were taught began quietly to come undone. Let us go and meet him in the dust and the heat at the moment he changed his mind. Rest and come with me to the hill. Klaus Schmidt was a German archaeologist, patient and careful, who had spent years working the ancient sites of that region, and who had learned the one thing that matters most in his profession: how to notice. He knew of the old survey, the one that had dismissed the Potbelly Hill as a medieval graveyard, but something in the notes nagged at him. Those broken worked stones. That flint, the hill's surface, it was said, was littered with worked flint, thousands upon thousands of struck flakes and tools and cores, far more than any graveyard would explain. And so, in the middle of the 1990s, Schmidt went to see the hill for himself, to look again at the thing everyone else had walked past. Picture him climbing that bare slope in the heat, the wind combing the pale grass, the great empty country rolling away below. Picture him bending to the ground and picking up the flint and turning it in his fingers, and knowing with the trained certainty of a lifetime that this was not medieval, that this flint was old, impossibly, wonderfully old, Stone Age old. older than the pyramids, older than the first cities, older than anything the sensible story allowed to be here. He is said to have understood in something close to a single day on that hilltop that he was standing on something extraordinary, that this was no graveyard, but a place from the deep dawn of our kind and a large one. He made his choice that day, the choice that would fill the rest of his life. He would dig the Potbelly Hill. Later he would put his certainty into words that have become famous among those who tell this story. That on that first day he understood he had only two choices: to walk away and never speak of it, or to spend the rest of his life here. He chose the hill, he chose to stay, and so the digging began, and almost at once the hill began to give up things that should not have existed. Not graves, not medieval walls, but stone, great worked stone, deliberately shaped, deliberately raised, deliberately carved, coming up out of the earth on a scale that made no sense for the age the flint insisted upon. The deeper they went, the older it got, and the older it got, the more impossible it became, until Schmidt and everyone with him were faced with a thing that the story of human history simply had no room for. They had found a temple, an enormous one, built of colossal carved stones. And every test, every layer, every scrap of evidence agreed on the one fact that changed everything: that it had been built roughly 11 or 12,000 years ago by people who, according to everything we thought we knew, had no business building anything at all. Let us go down now into the first of the great stone rings they uncovered and stand among the pillars and begin to feel the size of what these wanderers raised. Rest and descend with me into the temple. Imagine the earth being lifted away, season by season, careful brushful by careful brushful, and a shape beginning to emerge from the hill. Not a wall, not a grave, a circle. What Schmidt's team uncovered as they dug down into the Potbelly Hill were great rounded enclosures, vast rings set into the ground, walled with rough stone and benches, and standing within and around each ring, rising up out of the earth, enormous pillars of carved limestone. Not small standing stones, not modest markers, pillars taller than a man, taller than two men, some of them reaching up toward the height of a small house, weighing many tons apiece, quarried and shaped and raised and set in careful rings by people who had no metal tools to cut them and no wheel to move them. And the pillars had a shape, a particular, deliberate, unmistakable shape that repeats all through the site. They are shaped like the letter T. A tall, upright shaft of stone, and across the top a broad, flat cap, like the crossbar of a great capital T. Ring after ring of these T-shaped giants standing in the earth, ranged around the walls of each enclosure, and always at the very center of each ring, two more, larger than all the rest, standing alone in the middle, facing one another, the tallest stones of all. Stand in the middle of one of these rings in your imagination in the dark. Feel the space of it, the round wall of rough stone, the ring of towering T-pillars looming over you, and the two great central ones rising highest of all, silent, patient, immensely old. It is a place built to be stood inside, a place built to make a human being feel small and gathered and held, a place built plainly for something that mattered enormously to the people who raised it, for ceremony, for gathering, for whatever it was they came to this high bare hill to do. And here is the first tremor of the impossible, the first crack in the story you were taught, because the people who quarried and carved and raised these many-ton pillars and set them in great rings on the highest hill in the country were not city dwellers. They were not farmers with surplus grain and time on their hands. They were hunters, gatherers, wanderers who had not yet, as far as we can tell, planted a single field or built a single town. And yet here on this hill, before all of that, they raised a temple that would not be matched in scale for thousands of years. Let that impossibility begin to work on you gently as you sink. First the temple, then perhaps everything else. Rest among the great rings and let us look closer at the stones themselves. Let us stay a while with the sheer physical fact of the pillars, because the more you sit with the weight of them, the more astonishing this hill becomes. The great T-pillars of Göbekli Tepe were cut from the living limestone of the surrounding plateau. You can still find, not far from the enclosures, the quarries where they were worked, and in one of them, most hauntingly of all, a single vast pillar that was never finished, still lying where it was being cut, still joined along one edge to the bedrock it was being freed from. It would have been the largest of them all had it been raised, a stone reaching some 7 meters in length, weighing by careful estimate upward of 50 tons. 50 tons, a single stone, left lying in the quarry half-born for 12,000 years. Think slowly about what it takes to make even one of the smaller pillars, the ordinary ones, a mere 10 or 20 tons each. First, the stone must be found and chosen and freed from the bedrock, cut loose using nothing but other stones, harder stones, and fire and water and endless patient labor. For these people had no metal at all, not a single blade of bronze or iron in the whole world yet. Then the pillar must be shaped, its faces flattened, its T-form carved, its surface smoothed. Then it must be moved, dragged somehow across the ground and up the hill, without wheels, without draft animals broken to harness, by human muscle and rope and rollers and the coordinated effort of who knows how many people. And then it must be raised, lifted upright, and set precisely into its place in the ring and made to stand. For one pillar. And there are not 1 or 10, but dozens of them in ring after ring. And beneath the rings that have been dug, ground-sensing surveys suggest there are many more still buried, whole enclosures still sleeping in the hill. Perhaps 15 or 20 great rings in all, only a fraction yet uncovered. The labor of it is almost beyond imagining. Hundreds of people, surely, working together. Fed and organized and coordinated over years, over generations, toward a single enormous shared purpose on a bare hill with Stone Age hands. And they were hunters. That is the thing to hold as you drift. This was not the work of a kingdom with slaves and granaries and overseers. This was raised, as far as we can tell, by people who still lived by following the wild herds and gathering the wild grain. People the old story said were incapable of exactly this. They moved 50-ton stones with their bare hands and their shared will 12,000 years ago, for reasons we are still trying to understand. Let the weight of it settle over you, slow and immense like the pillars themselves. Rest beneath the great stones. We have not even looked yet at what is carved upon them. Come close to one of the pillars now in the dark and run your eyes over its surface, because the people who raised these stones did not leave them bare. They carved them, and what they carved will stay with you. Animals, everywhere animals, carved in relief on the flanks of the great T-pillars, sometimes shallow, sometimes standing almost fully out of the stone, a whole wild bestiary of the ancient world moving across the limestone in the dark. Foxes slinking low, their long tails carved with care. Wild boar, heavy and bristling. Snakes, many snakes, sometimes in great nets and cascades of them, pouring down the stone. Aurochs, the huge wild cattle of that age, long extinct now, taller and fiercer than any cow you have ever seen. Gazelles, wild asses, cranes and other birds, scorpions, spiders, and again vultures with their broad wings spread. These are not farm animals. Notice that as you lie here. There is not a single domestic beast among them, no sheep, no goat, no tame ox, because there were none yet anywhere in the world. This is a carved menagerie of the wild, dangerous, untamed world these hunters actually lived in. The predators and the prey, the creatures of the hunt and the creatures that hunted, rendered with astonishing skill and confidence into stone that would outlast their whole species. Whoever carved these knew these animals, watched them, feared them perhaps and revered them, and wanted them for reasons of their own, ranged forever around the great rings of their temple, and the carving is good. That is one of the quiet shocks of Göbekli Tepe. These are not crude scratchings. They are the work of real artists, assured, powerful, sophisticated, full of movement and life. A boar that seems about to charge off the stone. A fox caught mid-slink. Vultures with every feather considered. 12,000 years ago, before farming, before cities, before writing, someone stood on this hill and carved a running fox into limestone with a mastery that would not shame a sculptor of any age since. The hands that did this were not the hands of primitives struggling to survive. They were the hands of a people with skill and vision and a deep and complicated inner world that they needed somehow to set into stone. Why these animals? Why snakes and vultures and scorpions, so many of them dangerous, so many of them creatures of death and the dark? We will come to the guesses later in the deeper part of the night. For now, simply walk among them. The stone menagerie of the Potbelly Hill, foxes and boars and serpents and great spread-winged vultures, carved by hunters 12,000 years ago and buried, and waiting all that time in the dark of the hill for the light to find them again. Let them keep their silent watch around you as you sink towards sleep. Rest among the carved creatures. We will go deeper into the temple and into the mystery when you are ready. Come back to one of the great T-pillars and look at it again, more slowly this time, because there is something about these stones that most people miss at first, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The pillars are not just pillars, they are figures. They are meant to be someone. Look at the shape once more. The tall, upright shaft and the broad, flat slab across the top. Now let your eye read it differently. The long shaft is a body, and the broad slab on top, that is a head. A great stylized head, faceless, turned to look out across the ring. The T is not an abstract form at all. It is a person rendered in the simplest, most monumental way imaginable, a standing being, many tons of it, with its head held high above you in the dark. And once you have seen the head, the rest appears. On the sides of many of the pillars, carved in low relief, there are arms, long arms, running down the flanks of the stone, bending at the elbow. And at the front, where the two hands come together, they meet, carved fingers spread across the belly of the pillar, as if the great stone being were resting its hands upon itself, waiting, watching. Some of the pillars wear a belt carved in relief around the waist, and hanging from the belt a garment, a kind of loincloth, sometimes made, you can see it in the carving, from the pelt of an animal, a fox skin hanging down. So they are not stones. They are beings. Tall, faceless, long-armed beings with their hands folded on their bellies and animal pelts at their waists, standing in great rings on the hilltop, gazing out over the world with heads of blank stone. Who are they meant to be? We do not know, and that is part of their power. Ancestors, perhaps the honored dead, raised up in stone to stand guard forever, or spirits, or gods, or the mighty beings of some story these people told and we will never hear. Something more than human, certainly, for they are far larger than any person, and their faces are left blank, as if to say that what they represent has no face we could look upon. Stand among them now in the dark and feel it, that you are not standing in a ring of columns, but in a gathering of giants. Silent stone beings ringed around you, taller than any person, hands folded, heads raised, keeping some vast and patient vigil they have kept for 12,000 years. It is not frightening. It is solemn and strange and oddly companionable to be small in the dark, in the company of these great faceless guardians who were raised with such love and such labor and have been standing here, watching over an empty hill, since long before there was anything else in the world worth watching. Rest among the stone beings. Let them keep their watch over you too. In the middle of each great ring, remember, there stand two pillars taller than all the rest, alone, facing one another. Come now and stand between them, because they are the heart of the whole place and the deepest of its quiet mysteries. These two central beings are the largest of all, the tallest and finest stones on the hill, raised with the greatest care, set apart in the very center of the enclosure, while all the other pillars are ranged around the walls, looking inward toward these two. Everything about the design says that these two are the most important. The ring of guardians faces them. The whole structure gathers around them. Whatever happened in these enclosures, it happened in the presence of and in relation to these two great central figures, and they are a pair. That is what stays with you. Two of them standing together, facing each other, or standing side by side and gazing out together over the ring, two great beings at the center of everything. Are they two ancestors, a pair of gods, a divine couple, or two brothers, or two guardians of a threshold? On one of them, carved at the throat, some have seen a kind of necklace or pendant. On their sides, the same long arms and folded hands as the others, but rendered with even greater care. They are individuals. They are meant to be particular beings, known and named by the people who raised them, standing at the sacred center of the sacred place. And we will never know their names. That is the ache at the heart of Göbekli Tepe, and it is worth feeling gently here in the dark. These two great beings mattered enormously, mattered so much that a whole people moved mountains of stone to raise them and to gather around them. They had names, they had stories. There were surely songs about them and prayers to them, and things said in this ring, in this presence, that were the most important words in these people's lives. And every word of it is gone. The names, the stories, the songs, the prayers, all of it vanished into the same deep dark that swallowed the language these people spoke, leaving only the two great silent figures, facing one another at the center of the ring, keeping a meaning we can feel but can no longer read. Stand between them a while, the two great central ones, in the quiet and the dark. You do not need to know who they are. You can simply be here, small, between these two vast patient beings who have stood facing one another on this hill for 12,000 years, holding a secret they will never tell, and keeping, somehow, a stillness that feels almost like peace. Rest between the two at the center. Let their long patience be yours. There is one pillar at Göbekli Tepe more famous and more argued over than all the rest, and it is a strange and haunting thing. So let us look at it once carefully, and then hold its mystery lightly. It is usually called the vulture stone. On its broad face, carved in relief, is a scene, and it does feel like a scene, like something happening, rather than just a scattering of animals. At its center is a great vulture, its wings spread wide, and one wing is bent upward, curved, almost like an arm, and above that wing, resting upon it, there is a disc, a round shape, a ball or a sphere. Below the vulture there is a scorpion and other birds, and near the bottom, small and strange, a little headless figure of a man. A vulture with a sphere on its wing. A scorpion, a headless man, carved into stone 12,000 years ago, and no one can say for certain what it means. The vultures matter across this whole site, and there is a clue to them in the wider world of that age. In some ancient cultures of that region, in the millennia that followed, the dead were not buried whole. They were exposed, laid out in the open, on high places for the vultures to take. so that the great birds carried the flesh of the dead up into the sky. The vulture in that world was not a creature of horror, but a creature of passage. The one that carries the dead upward, that releases the soul, that mediates between the earth and the heavens. And so the vultures all over Göbekli Tepe, and this great vulture on its famous stone with the sphere upon its wing, may be carvings about death and the sky and the journey of the dead, a stone about the most important mystery there is. Some have gone much further. A few researchers have proposed that the animals on the vulture stone are not animals at all but constellations, that the stone is a kind of star map, and that it records in symbols some tremendous event in the sky, a comet or a great impact, remembered and set into stone. It is a bold and thrilling idea, and it may be true, and it may be entirely wrong. Most scholars are deeply cautious about it, and so should we be lying here in the dark. We do not know. The honest answer is that the vulture stone keeps its meaning. It may be a map of the sky. It may be a scene of death and the carrying up of the soul. It may be a story we would understand at once if only we could hear it told, and will never understand now. Let that be enough to have stood before it, the strange vulture with the sphere on its wing, the scorpion, the little headless man, and to have felt the weight of a meaning just out of reach. There is a particular piece in a mystery you are allowed not to solve. You do not have to decode the vulture stone tonight. You can simply let it be what it is, a message, carved with great care, from people who wanted to say something that mattered to them beyond all telling, sent forward 12,000 years to a world that can see it perfectly and read it not at all. Rest before the carved stone, and let its mystery keep. Let us turn now from the stones to the hands that made them, to the people themselves. Who were they, the builders of the Potbelly Hill? Let us imagine them gently, as fully as the evidence allows, because they deserve to be more than a puzzle. They were hunter-gatherers, living in that rich, rolling country at the very dawn of the settled world, some 12,000 years ago. And it is important to let go here of the poor bent caveman of the old imagination, the shivering primitive scraping a desperate living from a hostile world. These were not that. They lived in one of the most abundant landscapes on Earth at that time. The hills around them ran with wild game and great herds of gazelle that migrated through in their seasons, wild aurochs, wild boar, wild asses, deer. The land was thick with wild plants that fed them. And here is a detail that will matter enormously later. The wild grasses of those very hills included the wild ancestors of wheat. Wild wheat growing in dense stands on the slopes, so plentiful that a family with simple tools could gather in a few weeks enough grain to last much of the year. So these people were not starving. They were, by the standards of hunter-gatherers, rich. The land gave freely, and they knew it intimately. Every animal, every plant, every season, every stone. They were skilled beyond our easy imagining. Expert hunters, expert gatherers, expert workers of flint and bone and hide. And as the pillars prove, expert carvers and builders and organizers of vast shared labor. They had complex minds, complex beliefs, complex societies. They had, plainly, gods or spirits, or ancestors that mattered to them more than almost anything, enough to raise a mountain of carved stone in their honor. And they had, we now think, no permanent home. That is the strange and central fact. As far as the evidence shows, the builders of Göbekli Tepe did not live at Göbekli Tepe, not in the way we mean. There are so far no clear signs of ordinary houses there, no settled village, no farmed fields from those earliest, greatest phases. The hill was not a town. It was a destination, a place people came to, perhaps from across a wide region, perhaps in their seasons, gathering from many scattered bands to build and to worship and to feast. And then it seems to disperse again, back out into the wide hunting country, until the next gathering called them back. Hold that image as you drift of a people rich and skilled and free, wandering the abundant hills and drawn, again and again, across long distances, to this one high bare place to raise these great stone beings together, not driven by hunger, not forced by any king, drawn freely by something they believed, something they shared, something worth the enormous labor. Whatever called them to the hill, it was one of the oldest and deepest things our kind has ever felt. Rest among the people of the hill and let us go next to see them gathered to the feast. Rest. Imagine the hill then, on one of the days it was full, not empty and windswept as we first found it, but alive, crowded, loud, smoking with fires, thronged with people gathered from across the wide country for the great work and the great feast. We know there were feasts because the hill remembers them in the plainest way a hill can. Among the enclosures, the diggers found bone. Enormous quantities of animal bone, the shattered, butchered, cooked remains of vast numbers of animals. Above all, gazelle, the great migratory herds, hunted and brought here and eaten in quantities far beyond what any small resident group could have consumed. This was food for crowds, for gatherings, for hundreds of people come together in one place and fed. Picture it. The work of hauling and raising the great stones is a thing that takes many hands, hundreds of them, pulling together on the ropes, chanting perhaps, coordinated, straining, and then the slow rise of a pillar into its place, and the roar of the crowd when it stands, and around the labor, the feast, fires along the slopes, the great herds hunted and brought in, the smell of roasting gazelle drifting over the hill, people who have traveled for days to be here, meeting kin they see only at these gatherings, trading news, trading goods, trading husbands and wives perhaps, telling the old stories, singing the old songs, under the gaze of the great stone beings they have all come together to raise. Some think this is the very key to Göbekli Tepe, that the temple was, above all, a reason to gather. That in a world of scattered wandering bands, this shared holy place, and the shared enormous labor of building it, and the shared feasting that went with it, was the thing that bound a whole far-flung people together, that made them one people at all. The gods on the hill gave them a reason to come together in numbers no hunting band had ever come together before. And in coming together, in their hundreds again and again, season after season, generation after generation, they became something new, something larger, something that had never existed before on the earth. And that gathering, that coming together in unprecedented numbers around a shared and holy purpose, may have set in motion the greatest change in the whole human story, a change that would, in the end, remake the entire world. And that began, perhaps, not with a farm or a city, but right here with a feast, on this hill around these stones. But that is the turn of the whole tale, and it belongs to the deeper part of the night. For now, stay at the gathering. The fires, the crowds, the roasting meat, the great stones rising, the old songs on the wind. A whole people together on a hill 12,000 years ago, happy and fed and bound by something they loved. Rest among them at the great gathering and let it carry you down. Rest. Let us sit quietly, with the pure impossibility of the building, not to solve it, but to feel it, because the more you understand what they did not have, the more astonishing what they did becomes. They had no metal. Hold that first. Not a single tool of bronze or iron existed anywhere in the world. Every one of those great pillars was quarried, freed from the bedrock, and shaped using nothing but stone, harder stones struck against softer, flint picks and blades, and the patient old tricks of splitting rock with fire and water, heating it and cooling it until it cracked along the line you wanted. To carve a running fox in crisp relief into limestone with a flint tool is the work of extraordinary skill and extraordinary patience. They had both. They had no wheel, no cart, no pulley. The wheel would not be invented for thousands of years yet. So a pillar of 10 or 20 or 40 tons could not be rolled or driven anywhere. It had to be moved by muscle, by ropes of twisted plant fiber or hide, by wooden levers, by sledges dragged over rollers or over slicked earth, by ramps of packed rubble built up and torn down, and above all by people, many people, pulling together in rhythm, hauling a mountain of stone a hand's breadth at a time across the ground and up the hill. And they had no draft animals, no teams of oxen broken to the yoke, for nothing had yet been tamed. Every ounce of that force was human. Human backs, human arms, human coordination, human will. When we imagine the raising of a single great pillar, we must imagine a crowd, dozens, perhaps hundreds of people on the ropes and the levers, and someone calling the rhythm and the slow, terrible strain and the stone rising and the moment it stands, and the sound that must have gone up when it did. There is something almost holy in it when you let it settle. Not a machine anywhere, not a beast of burden, just human beings with stone in their hands and a shared belief in their hearts, moving mountains, literally moving mountains of carved rock, for the love of something we can no longer name. It is one of the purest demonstrations there has ever been of what our kind can do when enough of us want the same thing badly enough. And they did it 12,000 years ago on a bare hill, before anyone thought we could do anything at all. Rest with the weight of that and the wonder of it. Human hands and human hearts and nothing else. Rest. And now the strangest thing of all, the thing that has no easy answer, the reason the hill kept its secret so perfectly for so long. The people who built Göbekli Tepe in the end buried it on purpose, with their own hands. This is why it survived. The great enclosures were not simply abandoned to slowly fill with wind-blown dust over the ages. They were deliberately, carefully filled in, packed to the brim with rubble, with earth, with flint debris, with the broken bones of countless feasts, buried under a made mound of debris that the builders themselves heaped over their own temple, covering the great stone beings, burying the rings, hiding the whole thing away beneath the very hill it had helped to raise. That is why the pillars stood so well preserved for us to find, not fallen and scattered, but held upright, packed round, sealed in the protecting fill their own makers poured over them. Why? Why would a people spend generations raising something so vast, so laborious, so clearly sacred, and then deliberately bury it? We do not know. And the not knowing is one of the deep, quiet mysteries of the hill. Perhaps a temple, like a person, had a lifetime, and when its time was done, it was given a burial, laid to rest with honor under the earth, the way you would bury someone you loved. Perhaps the burying was itself the sacred act, the closing of one age and the opening of another. Perhaps something changed in what they believed, and the old beings had to be put away. Perhaps each ring, when its purpose was fulfilled, was reverently entombed, and a new one raised beside it, so that the hill grew by burial, layer upon buried layer, ring beneath ring. Whatever the reason, there is something extraordinarily moving in it. These people did not knock their temple down. They did not let it rot. They gathered one last time perhaps, and with the same enormous shared labor that had raised the stones, they gently covered them over, tucked them into the earth, and laid the whole holy place down to sleep. And it slept. For 12,000 years under the fill their own hands had poured, under the grass, under the wishing tree, it slept perfectly, patiently, kept, until the brushes and the trowels came at last and woke it. There is no better thought to rest on, here at the close of the first part of our journey. A sacred thing raised with love, and when its time was done, buried with love and kept safe in the dark of the earth across all the ages, waiting. Let yourself be tucked in like the temple, laid gently down, covered over, kept safe in the dark. Rest the way the great stones rested for a very long time and were not lost. Rest. We come now to the heart of it, to the single fact that turned Göbekli Tepe from a remarkable discovery into a revolution. It is a number, and it is the number that broke the story you were taught. When the diggers dated the oldest layers of the hill, using the burned material, the charcoal, the tools, every method they had, the answer came back, and it was almost too old to believe. The great enclosures, the earliest and in some ways the finest of them, were raised around 11,500 years ago, some of it older still, 12,000 years and more into the past. So old that the number stops meaning much and has to be measured against other things to be felt at all. So let us measure it. You have heard of Stonehenge, the great ring of standing stones. Göbekli Tepe is older than Stonehenge by about 6,000 years. 6,000. That is not a small gap. That is a gulf greater than the entire span of recorded history. Göbekli Tepe was already ancient, already buried and forgotten, thousands of years before the first stone of Stonehenge was ever raised. And the pyramids of Egypt, those symbols of unimaginable antiquity. Göbekli Tepe predates the Great Pyramid by some 7,000 years. When the pyramids were new, Göbekli Tepe had already been sleeping under its hill for longer than the pyramids are old today. And it is not only older than these famous monuments. It is older than the things we think of as the very foundations of civilization itself. It was built before writing. There would be no written word for another 6,000 years and more. Before the wheel, before metal of any kind, before pottery, these people did not yet even make fired clay pots. Before cities, there was not a single city anywhere on earth. And by the best evidence of its earliest phases, before farming, before the first field was sown, before the first animal was tamed, in the very last age of the wandering hunters. Let that number settle over you, slow and immense in the dark. A monumental temple, raised with colossal carved stones by people with no metal, no wheel, no writing, no pottery, no cities, and perhaps no farms. Every single thing the old story said had to come first, all of it came after. The temple is older than the foundations it was supposed to be built upon. And that impossibility is not a mistake, not a mismeasurement, not a fringe claim. It is the settled, tested, astonishing truth of the hill. Rest with the number that does not fit. Tomorrow, or in your dreams, we will follow where it leads. Rest. Now watch the old story turn over in the dark, gently, like a great stone rolling onto its other face. Remember what you were taught, the clean and sensible order of things. First, the farm. People learn to grow food, and only then, freed from the hunt, can they settle and gather in numbers and build towns, and at the very last, when there is surplus and leisure and safety, raise temples to their gods. Bread first, gods last. Survival, and then much later, the cathedral. That was the order. That was the law of how civilization was supposed to have been born. And Göbekli Tepe says, no, it happened the other way. Here is a cathedral, an enormous, sophisticated, labor-devouring temple, raised by people who had not yet grown a single field of grain, who still lived by the hunt and the wild harvest, who had none of the surplus and settlement and safety that were supposed to come first. The gods came first. The temple came first. The great shared act of worship and building came first, before the farm, before the town, before all of it. Sit with how completely that inverts the story. It means that the deepest engine of the change was not the stomach but the spirit. It means that what first drew our scattered, wandering ancestors together in great numbers and set them to vast shared labor and began the long road toward everything we became was not a better way of getting food. It was something they believed, something they worshipped. Something on a hill that mattered to them so much that they would haul mountains of stone for it and gather in their hundreds for it, before they had any of the settled comforts that were supposed to make such things possible. This is why Göbekli Tepe did not just add to the story of our origins. It turned the story over. It suggests that religion or belief, or the deep human hunger to gather around something sacred and greater than ourselves, was not a late luxury of civilization, but perhaps its very seed, the thing that came first and pulled everything else into being behind it, that we did not settle down and then invent our gods. We may have been drawn together by our gods and settled down in order to stay near them. Rest with that overturned story, resting quietly in the dark like the temple itself. It changes the shape of who we think we are. Rest. And here is where the overturned story becomes something almost breathtaking. A possibility so large and so beautiful that it is worth holding very gently as you drift toward the deep part of sleep. Think again about the great gatherings on the hill. Hundreds of people come together from across the wide country, season after season, to build and to worship and to feast. Now ask the simple, enormous question that follows. How do you feed them? How do you feed hundreds of gathered people? Again and again, year after year in one place, when you are still a hunter, still dependent on the wild herds that come and go with the seasons and cannot be counted upon. The wild gazelle were plentiful, yes, but a gathering of that size, repeated and reliable, needs a food that can be stored and controlled and depended upon. And growing all around those very hills, thick on the slopes, was the wild ancestor of wheat. And here is the astonishing thread that ties it all together. The genetic homeland of domesticated wheat. The place where the first cultivated grain on earth seems to have been born lies in the mountains just a short distance from Göbekli Tepe. The taming of wheat, the very beginning of farming, the change that would remake the whole world, appears to have happened right here, right beside the hill, at just about the time the great temple was drawing its crowds. And so some who study the hill have dared to wonder, what if it happened in that order? What if the temple came first, the belief, the gathering, the need to feed the crowds who came to raise the stones? And what if the pressure of feeding those great recurring gatherings was the very thing that drove these people right here to begin taming the wild grain? What if farming was not the cause of the gathering, but the consequence of it? What if we learned to grow wheat not to fill our own bellies in some scattered village, but to feed the multitudes who came together on a holy hill? What if, in the deepest sense, the temple built the field, and the field built the town, and the town built the world? We cannot be certain. It is a hypothesis, bold and contested, and the honest scholar holds it lightly. But feel the size of it as you sink. It would mean that the whole of settled human life, every farm and village and city and civilization that has ever existed, everything, all of it, began in a sense as a way to cater a religious festival. That the entire built world grew root and branch out of the human need to gather around something sacred. It is one of the most extraordinary ideas our origins have ever offered, and it was buried under a bare hill for 12,000 years, waiting. Rest with it, gently, the temple that made the field, that made the town, that made everything. Rest. For a long while, Göbekli Tepe seemed like a single impossible marvel, one lightning strike of genius on one lonely hill, a lone exception to everything. But the more the archaeologists looked at the surrounding country, the more they realized a thing that makes the whole story even larger. Göbekli Tepe was not alone. Scattered across that same rolling region of the far southeast, the hills and plains around the ancient city now called Şanlıurfa, there are other hills. And in hill after hill, when they began to look, they found the same thing: T-shaped pillars, carved enclosures, stone beings. The unmistakable signature of the same culture, the same builders, the same astonishingly early world. Not one temple, a whole landscape of them. A network of these sacred places dotted across the country, raised by the same people in the same deep dawn of our kind. They have a name for it now, this cluster of sites, a lovely name in the language of the country, Taş Tepeler, the Stone Hills. A dozen and more of these ancient places being slowly investigated, each one adding to the picture, each one confirming that Göbekli Tepe was not a freak, not a one-off miracle, but the grandest surviving expression of a whole flourishing world. A civilization, if we dare the word, of hunter-gatherer temple builders spread across the hills 12,000 years ago, all raising their great stone beings, all gathering, all worshipping, all part of something shared and vast. Think of what that means drifting here in the dark. It means this was not an accident, not a single inexplicable spark. It was a tradition, a widespread, established, long-lived way of being with its own art and architecture and belief, practiced across a whole region for centuries. There were master builders who trained apprentices. There were shared symbols understood from hill to hill. There was a whole world of meaning, coherent and sophisticated and utterly lost, of which Göbekli Tepe is simply the most magnificent surviving fragment. The hill is not the whole story. It is one page, torn from a book far larger than we ever imagined we had. And most of that book is still in the ground. Most of the stone hills are barely touched. Most of even Göbekli Tepe itself remains unexcavated, sleeping under the earth. We are, in truth, only at the very beginning of learning what these people did. Every year the hills give up a little more, and every time the world of these early builders grows larger, and older and stranger and more wonderful than we thought. Rest with that, the sense of a vast lost world, only its highest peaks yet showing above the soil, the rest still sleeping, still waiting, still to come. Rest, let us visit one of the sister hills, for it is strange and striking in its own way. Not far from Göbekli Tepe, on another rise in the same wide country, there is a place the diggers have been uncovering only recently, and it has given up wonders of its own. Here in one of the chambers, the pillars were not brought and set. They were carved directly out of the living bedrock, left standing where the stone itself stood, the surrounding rock cut away to free them, so that they rise straight up out of the floor of the earth as if they had grown there. To make a chamber that way, carving down into solid rock and leaving your pillars standing, is a labor of a different and staggering kind, and it gives the place a feeling unlike anywhere else, a sense of a room reached down into the bones of the world. And in that chamber, from one wall, a face looks out, a human head carved from the rock, emerging from the stone, its neck stretching from the wall so that the face gazes into the room, watching, present, alive in the way only a carved face can be. To come into that deep rock-cut chamber and find a face turned toward you out of the living wall after 12,000 years must be one of the most extraordinary encounters in all of archaeology. Someone in the deep dawn of us wanted a face here, wanted to be watched or to be accompanied, or to have this presence in this sacred deep place. And the face has kept its watch in the dark, in the stone, all this time. What did these chambers hold? What happened in them? We can only guess, but the guesses circle again and again around the same themes that run through the whole of this world. The beings, the ancestors, the spirits, the watchers. faces and figures raised in stone to be present, to gaze, to keep company with the living in their most sacred acts, whatever those acts were. A world densely peopled not only by the living but by these carved presences, the great beings, the faces in the rock, as if these people could not bear or did not wish to do the holy things alone. Sit a moment in that deep rock-cut room with the face gazing quietly from the wall. It is not frightening in the dark in your imagination. It is company. An old presence carved with care by someone who wanted it here, keeping its patient watch in the deep stone as it has for 12,000 years and as it will for 12,000 more. Rest in the chamber of the watching face. You are not alone in the dark. You never were. Rest. We keep circling the great unanswerable question, and now let us sit with it directly, softly, as sleep draws near. What did they believe? What was it exactly that these people came to the hills to worship, that they raised mountains of stone for? That mattered to them beyond all telling. We do not know. Let that be said plainly and gently. There is no writing to tell us, no myth of theirs that survived, no name of a single god or spirit. But the stones themselves whisper a few things if we listen. And what they whisper most of all is death and the dead. Think of the vultures everywhere on the pillars, the great birds that, in the beliefs of that whole region for millennia after, carried the dead up into the sky. Think of the animals of the dark and the threshold, the snakes, the scorpions, the creatures of danger and passage. And think of something the diggers found at Göbekli Tepe itself, among the fill and the bone, fragments of human skulls. Not whole burials, but skulls, some of them remarkably carved with deliberate grooves cut into the bone, worked and modified by human hands after death. A skull cult, some call it. A people who did something with the skulls of their dead, who kept them, marked them, perhaps displayed them, perhaps carried them, perhaps honored them in these very enclosures among the great stone beings. So it seems the hill was in some deep way a place of the dead, of the ancestors, a place where the living came to be with those who had gone before, the honored dead raised up, perhaps, as the great faceless stone beings themselves, standing forever in the rings. The skulls of the recent dead brought and tended, the vultures carved to carry the departed up into the wide sky. A temple, it may be, to the deepest and oldest religion there is, the veneration of the ancestors, the refusal to let the beloved dead simply vanish, the building of a place where the living and the dead could still, somehow, be together. And if that is even partly right, then there is something profoundly tender at the root of the whole impossible achievement. Everything, the mountains of moved stone, the carved beings, the great gatherings, the labor of generations, all of it may have grown from the simplest and most human root there is, the love of the living for the dead and the longing to keep them near. We built our first great thing, perhaps, out of grief and remembrance and love. Rest with that. Whatever they believed in exact particulars, they believed the dead were worth a mountain of stone. There are worse foundations for a civilization than that. Rest. We come now to the last part of our long night, not to the hill or the stones or the diggers, but to ourselves. Because in the end, Göbekli Tepe is not really a story about a temple. It is a story about us, about what we are and how long we have been it, and how much older and greater the human spirit turns out to be than we ever let ourselves believe. For a long time, quietly, we told ourselves a flattering and rather cruel story about our own past. That the deep past was crude. That the people of 12,000 years ago were simple, brutish, barely more than clever animals, scraping through their short, hard lives with nothing in their heads but survival. That everything fine and high and beautiful in us, art, faith, wonder, the capacity to dream something vast and then build it, was a late achievement. A thin, bright layer laid down only recently, only after we had civilized ourselves into something better than we started as. And Göbekli Tepe says quietly from under its hill, "No, you were always this." 12,000 years ago, before a single field was sown, before a single city rose, before a single word was written, human beings, a people exactly as intelligent, as sensitive, as spiritually deep as you, stood on a hill and dreamed something enormous and sacred and beautiful. And then together, with their bare hands, they built it. The capacity was already there, the whole of it. The art, the vision, the faith, the ability to organize vast shared labor toward a thing that fed no one and sheltered no one and existed purely because they found it holy. All of it already fully present in the so-called dawn of us. There is a deep dignity in that and a deep kinship. And it is a beautiful thing to rest on. The people who raised those stones were not lesser versions of us. They were us, the same minds, the same hearts, the same hunger to gather around something greater than ourselves and give it everything we have. When you stand among their pillars, you are not looking across a gulf at some primitive other. You are looking into a mirror across 12,000 years at your own kind, doing the most human thing there is, reaching together for the sacred and building it into the world. Let that close the distance in the dark as you drift. Those people on that hill so impossibly long ago were your family. They felt what you feel. They wondered what you wonder. They loved their dead and feared the dark and looked up at the same stars and longed for something larger than their small brief lives, and they built a monument to that longing that has outlasted everything. You come from them. You are still them. Rest in that long kinship. Rest. And yet here is the quieter, stranger truth that sits beside the wonder, and it is worth holding gently as sleep comes close. They built this enormous, magnificent, world-changing thing, and then it was completely, utterly forgotten. For 12,000 years, almost no one on earth knew it had ever existed at all. Think about how total that forgetting was. The people who built it buried it themselves, and then their world went on and changed, and the farms came, and the villages, and the towns, and the cities, and the empires, and all the long roar of history. And in all of it, across all those thousands of years, the memory of the hill and its stone beings simply faded and thinned and was lost. The names of the two great central figures gone. The stories gone. The songs gone. The whole world of meaning that had been worth a mountain of stone gone, so completely that when farmers plowed the slopes and turned up the carved pillars, they saw only awkward rocks and broke them up, and did not wonder for a moment what they had found. There is something humbling in that, almost frighteningly so. It means that greatness is no protection against forgetting, that you can build the most extraordinary thing your world has ever seen, pour generations of love and labor and belief into it, and still, given enough time, be erased so thoroughly that your descendants walk over your masterpiece and feel nothing. Deep time swallows everything, not out of cruelty, simply because memory is fragile, and 12,000 years is longer than any story can survive unwritten, longer than any name can last unspoken, longer than almost anything human can endure. And yet, and this is the turn, the comfort, the thing to carry down, it was not gone. Not truly. It was only sleeping. Buried and forgotten and lost, yes, but kept all that time in the dark of the hill waiting. And the same restless, curious, unkillable spirit that first raised it, the human spirit, our spirit, came back in the end, with brushes and trowels and patient wonder, and woke it and remembered it and gave it back to the world. The forgetting was long, but it was not the end. Nothing that is truly kept is ever quite the end. Rest with both truths at once, the way the hill holds them, that even the greatest things can be forgotten, and that even the most forgotten things can be found again. That deep time swallows everything, and that love and wonder and the patient turning of the earth sometimes give it back. You are the proof of it, lying here, remembering a hill that was lost for 12,000 years. The forgetting is real, but so is the finding. Rest and let the hill remember itself through you a little longer. Rest. Here is a thought to sink into slowly in the dark, because it is vast and quiet and strangely peaceful. If a thing like Göbekli Tepe could lie hidden under a bare hill for 12,000 years, walked over, plowed over, dismissed, overlooked, then what else is down there? What else is still sleeping under the grass, under the dust, under the ordinary ground, waiting to be found? Remember how much of Göbekli Tepe itself is still buried. Only a fraction of the hill has been dug, a handful of the great enclosures, when the surveys suggest there may be 15 or 20 in all, still down there, still whole, still waiting under the earth. And Göbekli Tepe is only one of the stone hills, and most of the others have barely been touched. And the stone hills are only one region of one country, in one small corner of a very large and very old world. How many hills in how many lands hold their own quiet, impossible secrets, unsuspected under someone's grazing sheep, under someone's field, under someone's town? We tend to feel that the map of the past is more or less filled in, that the big surprises are behind us, that we know the shape of our own story. And then a hill in the southeast of Turkey turns out to hold a temple that pushes the dawn of monumental humanity back by thousands of years and turns the whole story upside down. And you realize the map is not filled in at all. The map has enormous blank spaces still, marked only here be things we have not yet imagined. The past is not a closed book. It is a hill mostly unexcavated, with most of its rings still sleeping in the dark. There is something wonderful in that, not frightening, the sense that the deep past is still full of undiscovered marvels, that our story is larger and stranger than we know, that somewhere right now, under some quiet hill, something extraordinary is waiting, patient, kept, for the brush and the trowel and the wondering eye that will one day wake it. The age of discovery is not over. It has barely begun. Most of our own story is still underground. Let that be a comfort as you drift the vast, quiet, unread depth of the world beneath us, full of sleeping wonders, none of them lost, all of them simply waiting. You do not have to find them. You can just rest gently on top of all that patient, buried mystery, and let it keep its secrets a little longer, and let it keep you. Rest above the sleeping wonders of the deep earth. Rest. Let us feel for a moment, before the night grows too deep for feeling, the strange, enormous debt we owe to the people of the hill, a debt we can never repay and never even quite grasp, but that is worth acknowledging gently in the dark. Because if the boldest reading of Göbekli Tepe is even partly true, if the gathering came first, and the temple came first, and the feeding of the crowds who came to raise the stones helped set in motion the taming of the wheat, and the farms and the villages and everything after, then trace the line forward from that hill. The farm led to the surplus. The surplus led to the town. The town led to the city. The writing, the law, the wheel, the ship, the road, the empire, the book, the machine, the whole vast, intricate world you live inside tonight. Every part of it, following back and back and back through all the branching centuries toward a single route, a gathering of hunters on a bare hill, around some stones they found holy. Which means in some real and dizzying sense that the room you are lying in tonight, the walls, the roof, the bed, the light, the whole settled, sheltered world that lets you rest safe in the dark, all of it, however distantly, grows from that hill, from those people, from their belief and their gathering, and their willingness to move mountains of stone for something they could not eat and could not sell and simply loved. They did not know you, they could not have dreamed of you, and yet they began, without knowing it, the long chain that leads all the way down to this quiet moment and to you. We do not know their names, we never will, not one of them. The master builders, the great carvers, the ones who called the rhythm on the ropes, the ones who first thought to raise a stone being on that hill, all of them nameless now, and forever, dust for 12,000 years, remembered by no one, thanked by no one. And yet everyone who has ever lived a settled human life owes them something. A whole world was set in motion by people whose faces we will never see, and whose names were lost before writing existed to record them. So let this be a small, quiet act of thanks, here in the dark, a thing almost no one ever does. Thank you to the nameless people of the hill, for the mountains of stone, for the great gathering, for the beginning you never knew you were making. We are your descendants in spirit if not in blood, all of us who live in the world you helped set turning. We remember you tonight, though we do not know your names, and that remembering is the only thanks we have to give. Rest, and let them rest too, the nameless first builders, honored for one night by someone falling asleep in the world they began. Rest. Come out of the temple now and up onto the open hilltop into the night, because there is one last thread between you and the people of the hill, and it is shining over your roof right now. 12,000 years ago, when the great work was done for the day, when the ropes were coiled and the fires were burning low, and the stone beings stood dark against the last of the light, the people of the hill would have done what people on that bare high place have always done when night came. They would have looked up, and they would have seen the stars, a sky ablaze with them, undimmed by any light anywhere on the whole dark earth, thick and bright and wheeling slowly over the great T-shaped beings and the sleeping land. And they are, very nearly, the same stars you could see tonight. The constellations have drifted a little, over 12,000 years, shifted slowly by the long, slow wobble of the earth. But the sky they saw and the sky above you now are, in every way that matters to a human heart, the same sky. The same moon waxing and waning through the same slow month. The same scattered brilliance overhead. The same deep dark, pricked with the same faithful lights, that has hung over every human being who has ever lived, on every night there has ever been. Think of that as the deepest connection of all, deeper than the stones, deeper than the story, not the temple which is ruined, not the names which are lost, not even the beliefs which are gone, the stars. The people of the hill looked up at the same stars you can find tonight and felt, surely, some version of what you feel when you look up, the smallness and the wonder and the strange comfort of being a brief, warm creature under an enormous ancient sky. Across 12,000 years under the same wheeling lights, their wondering and your wondering are the same wondering. Their sky is your sky. Let that hold you now as your eyes grow heavy, the one unbroken thing, the sky. The builders of the hill are dust. Their temple is a ruin lovingly dug from the earth. But the stars they raised their eyes to when the work was done and the night came on are the very stars turning over your roof this moment, faithful and unhurried, exactly as they turned over the sleeping temple then. You lie beneath the same watch they lay beneath. You are held by the same sky. Rest under the old stars the way they rested 12,000 years ago when their great work was done for the day. Rest. What was it in the end that drove them? We keep circling this because it is the true center of the whole mystery, and now, in the deep quiet of the night, let us hold it as gently and as simply as we can. Strip away everything we cannot know, the particular gods, the particular rites, the particular meaning of the vultures and the snakes and the two great central beings. Strip it all away, and underneath there is a single impulse, and it is one you know intimately because you carry it yourself. It is the need to reach for something larger than your own small life. The need to stand under the enormous sky and feel the weight of the mystery of death, of the dead, of the vast, indifferent turning of the world, and to answer it somehow. To make something, to gather with others and say together in stone or in song or in silence, this matters. There is something here greater than us, and we will not simply live and eat and die without turning toward it. That is the oldest question and the oldest answer, and Göbekli Tepe is one of the very first times we can see our species asking it out loud, in a voice large enough to survive. Not how do I survive, they had that well in hand. But what does it mean? What are we? What is the great dark for? What do we owe the dead and the sky and the mystery? The temple on the hill is the sound of human beings at the very dawn of us, refusing to let those questions go unanswered, pouring everything they had, all their strength and skill and years, into a great stone reply. And we have never stopped. That same impulse that raised the stone beings on the hill raised, later, the pyramids and the great temples and the cathedrals and the mosques, and every place of worship and wonder our kind has ever built. It is the same reach across all the ages, the same refusal to be merely animals, the same insistence that there is something sacred and worth turning toward. Göbekli Tepe is not the strange exception to human nature. It is human nature, caught in the act. At the earliest moment we can still see it, the moment we first built our longing into the world. You feel it too. Everyone does some nights. Lying in the dark like this, the reaching, the wondering, the sense of something vast just beyond the edge of the known. It is the oldest thing in you. It is 12,000 years old and far older. It is the thing that built the hill. Let it be gentle in you tonight, not a question that needs answering, just a quiet reaching, the same reaching as theirs under the same stars across all that time. Rest with the oldest question. You do not have to answer it. You only have to feel it, and let it carry you down. Rest. There is one more thing the hill teaches softly, and it is a gentle one to hold as we near the end of the night. Göbekli Tepe was, above all, a place people came back to. Again and again, across centuries, they returned. And the human need for a place to return to is one of the deepest and kindest things about us. Think of it. In a world of wandering, of following the herds and the seasons, of no fixed home, these people made one fixed point. One place that stayed. One place that was always there on the highest hill that you could travel back to season after season, year after year, generation after generation, and find it waiting unchanged, holding the same great beings, the same gathered meaning, the same belonging. A still point in a wandering life, a place to return to. And when the old rings had served their time, they did not simply leave them. They buried them with care and raised new ones, so that the hill itself grew by return, layer on layer, ring beneath ring, each generation adding to the sacred place their parents and grandparents had gathered at, keeping the continuity, keeping the thread. The hill was memory made solid. It was the place where you were part of something older than yourself, and would be part of something older than your children. A great slow chain of returning, of coming back, of belonging to a place and a people across time. We still need this. We have never stopped needing it. The place you return to, the home, the town, the room, the tradition, the people, the sacred spot that stays the same while you change, is one of the things that makes a human life bearable and meaningful and whole. The people of the hill knew that at the very dawn of us. They built their place to return to before they built anything else. Before the farm, before the town, they built the still point, the belonging, the home for the spirit. Perhaps that too is what came first. And you have your own places to return to tonight, even if only in memory, the still points of your own life, the ones that wait for you unchanged, holding you across your own small span of years. Let yourself return to one of them now in the drifting dark as sleep comes close. A place that is always there, a place that holds you, a place to come back to. The people of the hill built theirs in stone 12,000 years ago, and it is still there, still waiting, dug from the earth, holding its meaning across all that time. Rest in your own still point tonight. Rest in the place that waits for you. Rest. You understand now what the hill means. Let the understanding go gently and let us do something simpler and sweeter for the rest of the night. Let us just go back and be there, not to study it, only to live in it a while before we say good night. Come back with me 12,000 years to a morning at the quarry. It is the gray hour before the sun, on the limestone shelf below the great hill where the stone is cut. The air is cool and smells of dust and dry grass, and the smoke of a small fire someone has kept alive through the night. A few people are already here, moving quietly, the way people move before dawn, without hurry, without words, half in the world of sleep still, letting their hands begin the work their minds have not quite woken to. They are freeing a stone, a great pale slab of limestone still joined to the bedrock along its lower edge, that will one day stand in a ring on the hill as one of the great beings. And the work of freeing it is slow and patient and strangely gentle. There is no blasting, no iron, no violence. There is a groove being worked along the line where the stone must part, deepened day by day, with stone picks and endless patience. There is fire banked against the rock to heat it, and then water poured hissing along the hot line so that the stone, expanding and cracking, gives up a little more of its hold. Heat and water and patience. Heat and water and patience. Watch the workers as the light grows. Their hands are hard and sure. They know this stone, have worked it for days, perhaps weeks, and they read it like a face, knowing where it will yield and where it will resist. There is a rhythm to them, an old unhurried rhythm, tap and pause and tap, that has more in common with a lullaby than with labor. No one is driven. No one is whipped. They work because the work is theirs and holy, and because the great being sleeping in this stone will one day stand on the hill and be worshipped, and they are the ones freeing it, and there is deep quiet pride in that and deep quiet peace. The sun clears the far hills at last, and lays its first gold light along the pale stone and the pale dust and the bent working figures, and the day has begun, the way 10,000 days began here, softly at the quarry in the cool gold light. Rest at the quarry in the first light. There is nothing to do but watch the slow, gentle work and breathe the cool air and let the old, unhurried rhythm carry you down. Tap and pause and tap. Rest. Now come to a greater day, one of the days the whole hill remembered, one of the days people would speak of for years. the day a great being was raised. The stone has been freed and shaped and carved over long moons of work and dragged slowly on sledges and rollers, up the long slope to the hill by many hands hauling together. And now it lies at the edge of its ring on its back, finished, waiting, a great T-shaped being, its faceless head, its folded hands, its carved animals all complete, lying still upon the earth, ready at last to stand. And the people have gathered for it. Not a handful now, a crowd. Word has gone out and they have come from the near camps and the far ones, because the raising of a great one is a thing you come to see, a thing you tell your children you were there for. They ring the enclosure. The ropes are laid out, plaited thick from fiber and hide, run under and around the great stone. A pit has been dug at the base of the socket, lined and readied, where the foot of the being will drop and lock and hold. And someone, an elder, a keeper of the work, whoever holds that honor, stands ready to call the rhythm. And then it begins. The call goes up and the crowd takes the ropes, dozens of them, 100 perhaps, and on the beat they pull. And the great stone stirs. It lifts a hand's breadth at the head, and men rush levers and props beneath it and hold. And the call comes again, and again they pull, and again it rises, and the props go higher. Slowly, impossibly, over long straining minutes, the great being tilts up from the earth toward the sky, the crowd chanting, straining, sweating, the ropes creaking, the elder calling the beat, until with one last enormous heave, the foot drops home into its socket and the great stone being stands upright, towering, alive against the sky. And the sound that goes up. Imagine it, the roar, the cry, the flood of it, hundreds of voices at once, as the great being takes its place in the ring and stands for the first time, gazing out over the hill and the wide country and the sea of upturned faces. Years of labor, a whole people's love and strength. And now it stands and will stand, longer than any of them can imagine, longer than their whole world will last. Rest in that great moment of joy, the stone standing, the crowd roaring, the being risen at last against the golden sky. Let the roar fade slowly into the wind, and the wind into your breathing, and rest. Rest. Come now to something small and quiet after the roar of the raising, to a single person, alone with a stone, doing the most patient work there is. Come and sit with the carver. It is a still afternoon, and the carver is at work on the flank of a pillar, bringing a fox out of the stone. Not quickly. Nothing here is quick. With a fine flint tool and a small stone to strike it, chip by tiny chip, the carver is coaxing the shape of a running fox out of the flat limestone, the long body, the pricked ears, the sharp muzzle, the great plumed tail. It has taken days already. It will take days more. And the carver does not hurry, because hurry has no place here. The fox has waited in the stone forever and can wait a little longer to be born. Watch the hands. They are sure and slow and endlessly patient. A chip and a pause to look, and a breath and another chip. The carver's whole world has narrowed to this small patch of stone, this one curve of the fox's back, this one careful line. Everything else, the hill, the crowds, the work of the others, has fallen away, and there is only the stone and the tool and the shape slowly emerging, and the deep, quiet absorption of a person lost happily in a work they love and are good at. There is no signature. The carver will never be known. 12,000 years from now, people will stand before this very fox and marvel at it, and wonder at the skill and the sureness of the hand that made it, and they will never know a single thing about the person sitting here now, this still afternoon, patiently bringing it to life. Not a name, not a face, nothing but the fox itself running forever across the stone, the only trace this person will leave in all the vastness of time. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps it was enough for the carver too, not to be remembered, but simply to make the fox well, to bring it out of the stone as beautifully as it could be brought, for the being it adorns and the people who will gather here and whatever gods are watching. To do the work well for its own sake and for love, and let the remembering take care of itself. Rest with the carver in the still afternoon, chip by patient chip. Let the slow, absorbed rhythm of a person lost in good work carry you all the way down. A chip and a pause and a breath. Rest. Now the deepest scene of all, a night. A night in the ring among the great beings when whatever it was they truly came here to do was done. We cannot know its particulars, but we can feel its shape and drift inside it in the dark. It is full night on the hill. The crowds of the day have quieted. In the great enclosure, a fire burns low at the center, between the two tall beings, and its light moves and flickers across the ring, throwing the great faceless heads into shifting shadow, catching the carved animals so that the foxes and the boars and the serpents seem, in the firelight, almost to move, to breathe, to be alive along the stone. The tea-beings loom in the dark all around, taller than ever in the low light, gathered close, watching. A small number of people are here now, not the crowd, but the few, the keepers, whoever was permitted into the ring at night for the deep rites. They are still. Perhaps there is a low sound, a chant, a drum, a bone flute breathing some old melody into the dark. Perhaps there is silence. Perhaps the skulls of the honored dead are here in the ring, brought into the presence of the great beings, so that the living and the dead and the gods are all gathered together, this one night in the firelight on the hill at the still center of their world. Whatever they did here, they believed it mattered more than anything. This was the point of it all, the quarrying, the raising, the carving, the feasting, all of it built toward moments like this one, the ring complete, the fire lit, the beings gathered, the rite performed in the deep night on the high hill under the enormous stars. This was where they touched the sacred. This was where, for these people, the veil between the worlds grew thin, and something vast drew near and was worshipped, and was, perhaps, for a moment, felt. Lie in the ring with them, in the firelight, in the dark. You do not need to know the words of the chant or the meaning of the rite. You only need to feel the great stillness of it, the low fire, the looming patient beings, the few faithful gathered, the enormous starry dark pressing down, and the deep sense of being present at something holy, something that mattered, something at the very center of the world. It is one of the most peaceful places a mind can rest. Rest in the ring, in the firelight, Among the great stone beings on the holy hill in the deep old night, rest. The long road to the hill, one more scene before we turn toward sleep in earnest, and it is a gentle, wandering one. Let us walk with the pilgrims the long road to the hill. For many who came to the great gatherings, the hill was not close. They came from far, from other valleys, other rivers, other hunting grounds, days of walking away. And so, in the seasons of the gathering, the wide country would fill, softly with people on the move, small bands, families, groups of the young, all making their slow way across the rolling land toward the one high place they all held holy. Walk with one such band in the long gold evening light as they near the end of their journey. They have been walking for days. They are tired in the good way, the way of bodies that have moved all day through open country. They carry little, some food, some tools, some gift perhaps for the hill, some small precious thing. And as they crest a rise, someone at the front stops and points, and the others gather, and there, far off across the golden land on the highest hill for miles, they can see it. The great beings, tiny with distance, standing against the evening sky. The hill, they have arrived, almost. Feel what moves through them at that sight. Relief at the journey's near end. Joy at the gathering to come, the kin they will see, the feasts, the rites, the being together in numbers their scattered lives never otherwise allowed. And something deeper, something like homecoming, though the hill is no one's home. The sense of returning to the still point, the sacred center, the place that holds them all and always has. They pick up their pace, a little in the failing light, toward the fires they can now see beginning to bloom on the distant slope, and the sound of the gathered people carrying faint across the dusk. There is nothing sweeter than the end of a long journey toward a place you love with people you love at the close of the day. The tiredness that is almost pleasure. The lights ahead. The welcome coming. Let yourself be one of them tonight, walking the last of the long road across the golden evening land, the holy hill rising ahead, the fires blooming, the gathering near, everything you were traveling toward almost within reach. And let that sweet arriving tiredness be your tiredness now, the good heavy pull of a journey nearly done, drawing you gently down toward rest. You are almost there, almost home, rest. There came for each of the great rings a last day, the day it was laid to rest. And though we do not know the rite of it, we can imagine the shape, and it is a tender thing, and a fitting one to move through as the night grows deep. A ring had stood and served for a long time, for generations. Perhaps its beings had been raised and worshipped, its rites performed, its dead honored, its gatherings held, through all the seasons of many lifetimes. And now, for reasons that were surely holy and are wholly lost to us, its time had come. It would not be abandoned. It would not be left to fall. It would be buried gently, deliberately by the hands of the people who loved it. Imagine that day. The people gathered one last time in and around the ring, perhaps in mourning, perhaps in some solemn joy, perhaps both, the way a good funeral holds both. And then the great labor reversed. Not the raising of stones, but the covering of them. Basket by basket, the fill is brought, rubble and earth, and the bones of the final feasts and offerings and broken tools, and poured into the ring around the feet of the great beings, up their bodies, higher and higher, packing them round, holding them upright, tucking them in. And the great faceless heads are the last to go under. Picture that, the fill rising slowly up the towering stones, until only the broad heads still show above the earth, gazing out one final time over the hill and the country and the gathered people. And then the last baskets and the earth closing over them, and the ring gone, buried, sleeping. A smooth mound of made earth where the great gathering place had been. The people stand a while, perhaps, over the covered ring. And then they turn and go and leave it to its long rest. There is no sadness in it that need trouble your sleep. It was not destruction, it was care. They put their holy place to bed the way you would put a beloved child to bed, gently, thoroughly, with love, covering it over, keeping it safe in the warm dark of the earth. And in doing so, without knowing it, they preserved it perfectly for us for 12,000 years. The burying was an act of love, and love, it turns out, keeps things. Rest. As the ring was laid to rest, covered over, held safe, tucked gently into the dark, rest. And there came in the end a last gathering of all, a final time the people came to the hill before they came no more. And though no one there could have known it was the last, we can stand in it gently and feel the long, slow ending of a world. For the world had been changing all the while. Down in the valleys, the wild wheat had become tame wheat. The fields had spread. The first small villages had put down roots. People were learning to stay in one place, to live beside their grain and their growing flocks, to build homes that lasted. And slowly, over generations, the old wandering life, the life of the great seasonal gatherings on the holy hill, began to loosen and fade. Why travel days to the far hill when your life, your food, your people were now rooted here in your own village by your own fields? And so the gatherings grew smaller, the crowds thinned. Fewer came and less often. The great work of raising new rings slowed and then stopped. The old ones were buried and no new ones rose to replace them. The hill that had drawn a whole far-flung people together for centuries was quietly, gently being let go, not rejected, not forgotten, yet just outgrown as the world it had helped to make moved on without it. Picture the last gathering then, smaller than the great ones of old, a remnant, the faithful few who still made the journey, still remembered, still came. The old rites perhaps performed one final time by people who felt the thinning, who knew without saying it that the old ways were passing. A last fire, a last feast more modest than the feasts of the golden years, a last night among the beings that still stood unburied. And then in the morning the leaving, and no one came back. It is a gentle ending as endings go, not a catastrophe, not a conquest, just a world quietly outgrowing the thing that had birthed it. The way a grown child outgrows the home that raised them, with no drama, no disaster, only the slow, soft closing of a long and holy chapter. The hill had done its work. It had gathered the people and begun the great change, and now the change had swept on past it and left it behind in peace. Rest at the last gathering in the small final fire among the faithful few. The long work is done. It is time now to let the hills sleep, rest. And now let the years move the way they only can once the people are gone and there is no one left to count them. Let us watch from a great gentle height the long sleep of the hill. The last of the rings lies buried. The last fire is cold. The last of the people have gone down into the valleys and their new settled lives, and the hill is empty. And the wind moves over it, and the grass grows over the made mounds, and the great beings sleep in the dark beneath, upright, packed round, held safe, dreaming their stone dreams. And the seasons turn, and turn, and turn. Feel the depth of the time now, slow and vast, as sleep draws close. 1,000 years pass over the sleeping hill. The wild grass greens and browns and greens again 1,000 times. Rain falls and dries and falls. Below in the valleys, the villages grow into towns and the towns into cities, and the first great civilizations of the world rise up, the very civilizations the hill helped to seed. And none of them remember the hill. 1,000 years, and then another, and another. The pyramids are built far away and the hill sleeps on, already 7,000 years old when they are new. Empires rise and fall across the wide world, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, armies march and cities burn. And kings are crowned and forgotten. And through all of it, the hill sleeps, its great beings undisturbed in the dark, keeping their patient vigil under the grass, remembering nothing, disturbed by nothing, waiting without knowing they wait. 12,000 turnings of the seasons. 12,000 years of rain and sun and wind and silence over the buried rings. There is the deepest peace imaginable in that long sleep, and it is a beautiful thing to sink into. The great beings laid gently to rest, holding their stillness across an ocean of time so vast it stops meaning anything. Through every war and every wonder of all of human history, simply sleeping, simply kept, simply waiting in the warm dark of the earth, patient beyond all patience, at rest beyond all rest. Let their long sleep be your sleep now. 12,000 years of stillness, of safety, of the quiet dark. Rest the way the hill rested for longer than all of history. Rest. And then, after all that time, after the long sleep beyond all measure, there came at last a waking. Gentle, almost tender, the return of the light. It began, as we have seen, with one man on the hilltop bending to pick up the flint and knowing. And then the brushes came, and the trowels, and the careful hands. And season by season, layer by layer, the earth that had been so lovingly poured over the great beings 12,000 years before was, just as lovingly, lifted away. Imagine it from the hill's own long dream, if a hill could dream. 12,000 years of dark and silence and stillness. And then faintly from far above a disturbance, a scratching, a lightning, the weight of the earth easing a little and then a little more. And then after all that time, after all that dark, a thread of light reaching down through the fill, touching a great faceless head for the first time in 12,000 years. And then more light, and the air, and the sky. opening again above the great beings, the same sky, the same stars come nightfall, as though no time had passed at all. And human hands again. Human faces again bending close in wonder, the faces of a species the builders could never have imagined, from a world they could not have dreamed of. And yet the same species, the same kind, the same wondering hearts, come at last to wake the sleeping temple and to marvel at it and to love it. The great beings uncovered, standing again in the open air, gazing out once more over the hill and the wide country into the light, after the longest night any made thing has ever slept through. There is such quiet joy in that waking. The lost is found. The forgotten is remembered. The sleeper wakes. The great beings that were tucked so gently into the dark by hands that loved them are lifted at last back into the light by hands that love them still, across all that impossible distance of time. Nothing truly kept is ever quite lost. The hill proves it. It slept for 12,000 years and it woke and it is here and we have seen it. Rest in the gentleness of the waking, the light returning, the air, the sky, the wonder. And know as you drift that waking always comes in the end after even the longest sleep. Rest. There is one small thing left to tell before we say good night, and it is a gentle bridge from that ancient world all the way back to now. It is about the tree. Remember the lone mulberry tree near the top of the hill, the old wind-shaped tree that stood there when the archaeologists came, the one the local people held to be a wishing tree, and tied strips of cloth to in hope for generations. It stood on the highest point of Göbekli Tepe, its roots reaching down into the made mound, down toward the buried rings, all through the long centuries when no one knew what lay beneath. A single tree keeping a kind of vigil over the sleeping temple without knowing what it kept. Think of the quiet poetry in that. For all those years when the hill was just a hill, when no one remembered the great beings sleeping in the dark below, there was still something there, a tree on the sacred spot that people came to and made wishes at and tied their small hopes to. As if some faint memory, some dim sense of the holiness of the place had survived even the total forgetting had come down through all those thousands of years, not as a story, not as a name, but simply as a feeling that this hill, this high place, was somewhere you might come to hope and to wish and to reach for something larger than yourself. Which is, of course, exactly what the hill had always been for. 12,000 years ago, people climbed it to reach for the sacred, to gather their hopes and their dead and their wonder into one high holy place. And 12,000 years later, having forgotten every name and every rite and every stone, people were still climbing it to a lone tree to tie a strip of cloth and make a wish and reach still for something larger than themselves. The temple was gone, buried, forgotten. But the human impulse that built it never went anywhere. It was still there on the same hill, under the same sky, tying wishes to a tree. We are so much more continuous than we know. The wish tied to the wishing tree and the fox carved into the great stone come from the same place in us, 12,000 years apart. We never really changed. We are still the people of the hill, still reaching, still hoping, still climbing the high place to touch the sacred. Rest with that continuity, warm and unbroken, running like a golden thread from the great beings in the dark all the way to you here tonight, reaching in your own quiet way for rest. Rest. Let us think softly, slowly about permanence, about the strange comfort of things that outlast us, because it is one of the gentlest thoughts the hill has to give, and a fine one to sink toward sleep on. The people who raised the great beings are gone, every one of them. Their names, their voices, their faces, their whole world gone. 12,000 years gone, dust beyond dust. And yet the stones they raised still stand. The fox one of them carved still runs across the limestone. The great faceless heads still gaze out over the country. The makers vanished utterly, and the made things remained, outlasting their makers by a span of time so vast it cannot really be felt, only bowed to. We might think that a sad thing, and in one light it is. But turn it gently in the dark and see the comfort in it. It means that what we make can be so much larger than we are. That a brief, small, mortal creature, a person no different from you, who lived and worried and laughed and died in a handful of decades, can set their hands to something that will still be here, still speaking, still beautiful 12,000 years after their last breath. Our lives are short, but the things we make with love can be almost endless. There is a kind of immortality in it, quiet and real. That has nothing to do with being remembered. The carver of the fox is forgotten completely and forever, but the fox remains. And in the fox, something of the carver remains too, not the name, not the face, but the care, the skill, the love, the particular way of seeing a running fox and wanting to keep it. That survived. That outlasted the whole vanished world it was born in. The maker is gone, but the making carries the maker forward silently across all of time. Let that be a soft comfort as you drift. Nothing you make with love is wasted, and nothing done with care is truly lost. The people of the hill did not build to be remembered, they were not, they are utterly forgotten. But what they made with love outlasted everything and reached across 12,000 years to move a stranger falling asleep in a world they could not dream of. That is enough. That is more than enough. Rest among the stones that outlast us, and take their quiet comfort with you down into sleep. Rest. Think for a gentle moment about how the people of the hill lived, not the temple, but the shape of their days, because there is something in it that our restless modern hearts are quietly starving for, and it is a good thing to rest on. They had less than we have, almost unimaginably less. No comfort we would recognize, no security, no medicine. No certainty of the next meal beyond what the land and the hunt would give. And yet, and this is the strange thing the deep past keeps whispering to us, they do not seem to have been the desperate, joyless creatures we once imagined. They had time, they had each other. They had a world dense with meaning, where every animal and stone and star was alive with significance, where the dead were near, where the sacred was woven through every ordinary day. They belonged to a place, to a people, to a story far larger than themselves. We have so much they never had. And we have lost so much they never lost. We carry weights they never carried, the weight of hurry, of noise, of endless choice, of a world so vast and fast and full that a single human heart can hardly find its footing in it. We lie awake, so many of us, in our safe and comfortable rooms, carrying burdens they would not have understood and missing, without quite knowing it, the very things they had in abundance. The slowness, the belonging, the deep, quiet meaning of a life lived close to the earth and the stars and the dead and the sacred. You cannot go back. Nobody can. But you can tonight for a few hours set the weight down. You can let the hurry go. You can let the noise fade. You can let the vast, fast world release its grip and lie here in the dark, as simply as any person has ever lain in the dark on any night in all of human history. A warm creature under the old stars, safe for now, with nothing to do and nowhere to be. That much at least you can still have. That much has never changed. So set it down now, the whole weight of your restless world. You do not have to carry it into sleep. The people of the hill did not carry it, and you need not either, not tonight. Let it go piece by piece, the hurry and the noise and the endless choosing, until there is only this, the dark, the quiet, your own slow breath, and the deep old peace that has always been waiting underneath the noise. Rest, unburdened, the way our kind rested for 100,000 nights before the weight was ever invented. Rest. Here is a thought that sounds at first as though it should trouble us, and turns out, if you hold it gently, to be one of the most restful there is. It is the thought of our own smallness against the vastness of time. 12,000 years. Feel it once more softly. The hill slept for 12,000 years, and 12,000 years is longer than all of written history, and written history already contains more than any mind can hold. Every war, every king, every love and loss and triumph and grief of every civilization that ever kept a record. And all of that, the entire remembered story of humankind, fits inside the sleep of a single hill. And the sleep of the hill fits in turn inside deeper times still, the tens of thousands of years of humans before it, the millions of years of life before us, the billions of years of the turning earth and the wheeling stars. Against all that, a single human life is almost nothing. A flicker, a breath. You will live your handful of decades as the people of the hill lived theirs, as the carver of the fox lived his, and then you will be gone, as they are gone, into the same vast quiet. And we spend so much of our brief flicker afraid of exactly that, clutching, striving, terrified of our own smallness, our own brevity, our own inevitable vanishing. But lie here under the same old sky the builders lay under, and feel how the smallness can turn in the dark into something like peace. If you are small, then your burdens are small too. If your life is a brief flicker, then its griefs and its worries are brief flickers as well, and will pass as everything passes into the same gentle vastness. You do not have to hold up the sky. You do not have to outlast the stars. You are a small, warm creature under a vast old heaven, here for a little while and then at rest, and there is nothing to fear in that. Nothing at all, because it is simply the way of all things, the way of the builders and the carvers and the kings and the stars themselves. Let your smallness be a comfort tonight, not a fear. Let the vastness hold you the way it has held every living thing that ever lay down in the dark. You are a small part of something immense and ancient and patient and kind, and your only task tonight is the same task the hill had for 12,000 years, simply to rest and to be kept and to trust the long, slow turning of things. Rest small and safe under the vast and ancient sky. Rest and hear. As the night grows very deep and sleep draws very near, is the last comfort of the hill, the one to carry down with you into the dark. It is this: the dark was never empty. Something was always keeping watch. Think of the great beings through all those 12,000 years of sleep. Buried, yes, forgotten, yes, but still there. Still standing upright in the dark of the hill, their faceless heads still raised, their hands still folded, keeping, even buried, even forgotten, even in the total dark, some kind of patient vigil over the sleeping earth above them. The hill was never truly empty. All through the long night of the ages, the great watchers stood in the dark below, keeping their silent watch, waiting, present, faithful, whether anyone knew it or not. And is that not the oldest and deepest comfort our kind has ever reached for? The sense that the dark is not empty, that we are not alone in the night. These people built it into stone 12,000 years ago, great watching beings, set up to keep company with the living and the dead, to stand guard in the sacred dark, to be present when the fire burned low and the night pressed close. They could not bear an empty dark, neither can we. And so all through our history, in every form, we have reached for the same thing: the watchers, the guardians, the presences, the sense that something wakeful holds the night while we sleep. Let that hold you now. Whatever you believe the great beings truly were, ancestors, gods, spirits, or only stone and longing, let the feeling underneath them be true for you this one night. That the dark is not empty, that something keeps watch, that you can close your eyes and let go of your own long vigil and trust the night to hold you, the way the hill held its great watchers, the way the great watchers held the dark across all the patient ages. You do not have to keep watch tonight. The watch is kept. It has always been kept. So let your eyes close now and let the dark be full and friendly and safe. The great beings are standing in it still somewhere, keeping their 12,000-year vigil, and the stars are turning over them and over you, faithful and unhurried, and nothing is empty and nothing is lost, and you are watched over and kept and small and safe. There is nothing left to do. There is only rest. Let it come, rest. Let us go back once more to the carved animals, the foxes and the boars, the snakes and the vultures, the scorpions and the great wild cattle, not to ask again what they meant, but to feel our way gently into the world of the people who carved them. Because those animals are a window, and through it we can glimpse something we have almost entirely lost. To the people of the hill, the world was not divided as it is for us, humans here, and mere animals there, dumb beasts beneath us. Their world, as best we can tell and as we know from the hunter-gatherers who survived into recent times, was alive in every part. The animals were not lesser. They were powers, persons almost, each with its own spirit, its own gifts, its own dangerous magic. The fox with its cunning, the vulture with its power over the dead, the snake with its knowledge of the hidden earth, the great bull with its raw, terrible strength. To live in that world was to live surrounded always by a great company of animal spirits, watching, powerful, worthy of fear and respect and worship. And so when they carved these creatures onto the great beings, ringing them round the sacred enclosures, they were not decorating. They were gathering the powers of the living world into the holy place, surrounding themselves in their most sacred moments with the whole watching company of the animal spirits, drawing on their power, honoring them, keeping them near. The temple was not just a place of human worship. It was a meeting place of all the powers of the world, human and animal, living and dead, gathered together in the rings. Imagine living like that. Imagine a world in which you were never alone, never merely human, but always held within a vast living web of spirits and powers. The fox spirit and the vulture spirit and the spirits of the hills and the rivers and the stars, all of them real, all of them present, all of them part of the great sacred conversation of the world. It was, perhaps, a frightening way to live, but it was also, surely, a deeply companioned one, a world dense with presence, where nothing was dead and nothing was merely itself, where even the running fox was a kind of holy neighbor. We have mostly lost that. We live in a world we have declared to be mostly dead matter and mechanism and dumb beasts. But some part of us remembers the older way and longs for it, the way we still love animals beyond all reason, still feel watched by the dark woods, still sense presences we cannot name. Let that older, richer, more companioned world hold you tonight, a world alive in every part, where the carved creatures on the stones were living powers keeping you company in the sacred dark. You are not alone in the world or in the night. The old people knew that. Let yourself know it too and rest, surrounded by the whole living company of things. Rest. We have come tonight again and again to the edge of things we cannot know, who the great beings were, what the rites were, what the vulture stone means, why they buried it, what exactly they believed. And I want to say something gentle about all that not knowing, because it is not a failure and it need not be a frustration. It can be, if you let it, a deep and restful peace. We are creatures who crave answers. We want the mystery solved, the question closed, the box ticked. And there is a place for that. It is a fine and noble thing, the patient work of the archaeologist, wresting what truth they can from the stones. But there is also a place for the opposite, for standing before a great mystery and letting it stay a mystery, for feeling the vastness of what we do not know and cannot know, and being not frustrated by it but somehow soothed. Because a world without mystery would be a small and airless place. If we knew everything, every name, every meaning, every why, the hill would shrink to a fact, a diagram, a solved thing, and something precious would go out of it. It is the not knowing that keeps it vast. It is the mystery that keeps it holy. The great beings gaze out over the country with their faceless heads precisely because we cannot see their faces, and in not seeing we are left room to wonder, and wondering is a larger and finer thing than knowing. So let the questions stay open tonight and feel how restful that can be. You do not have to solve Göbekli Tepe. No one ever will, not fully, and that is not a tragedy, that is the mercy of it, the thing that keeps it forever worth returning to. Some mysteries are meant to be lived with, not solved, carried gently, not cracked open, loved for their darkness as much as their light. The hill is one of them. It will keep its deepest secrets forever, and that is exactly right, and you can lay down tonight the whole exhausting human need to know. Let the not knowing be soft and vast and kind. You do not have to understand the great beings to rest among them. You do not have to solve the mystery to be soothed by it. Let the questions float, unanswered and unanswerable in the dark, like the stars, beautiful precisely because they are beyond your reach. There is nothing to figure out tonight. There is only the mystery and the dark and your slow breath and rest. Rest. Here is the last reflection, and it is the simplest, and it reaches across the whole of human time to touch you tonight exactly where you lie. It is about a fire and a circle of people around it. Everything at Göbekli Tepe, when you strip it down to its root, comes from one ancient human act, people gathering together in a circle around something that mattered. The great rings themselves are circles. The people gathered in them around the central beings, around the fire in a ring. And that circle, people drawn together around a shared center, a shared warmth, a shared meaning, is perhaps the oldest and most human shape there is. Long before the hill, our ancestors sat in circles around fires, in the mouths of caves under the stars, for hundreds of thousands of years. The fire at the center, giving light and warmth and safety against the dark. The faces around it lit gold close together. The stories told, the songs sung, the dead remembered, the bonds made. That circle around the fire is where we became human. It is where language grew and myth and love and everything that makes us what we are. And Göbekli Tepe is that same circle made permanent, made monumental, made holy, the eternal human circle, raised in stone on a hill to last forever. And we have never left the circle. We gather still around tables, around hearths, around screens, around anything that gives us a shared center and a shared warmth. The shapes change, the circle remains. The deep need to be drawn together around something that matters against the dark that is 12,000 years old on the hill and far, far older in us. And it is alive in you tonight, even here, even alone, listening to a voice in the dark that has, in its own strange way, gathered you into a circle with everyone else who is listening. Everyone else drifting towards sleep on the sound of the same story. So feel yourself held in that great circle now, the oldest circle, the human circle, running unbroken from the first fire in the first cave, through the great rings on the hill, all the way to this quiet moment, this dark room, this voice. You are part of it. You always were. gathered with all of us around the warmth against the dark, exactly as our kind has gathered since the very beginning. There is no safer place to be. Rest in the circle by the fire, in the company of all who have ever gathered. Rest. Come and stand once more among the great beings in the quiet, and let us think softly about their gaze, about what it is to be looked at by something so old and so patient and so kind. They have no eyes, the great beings. Their broad stone heads are faceless, blank, without features of any kind. And yet, when you stand among them, you feel looked at. You feel their attention, somehow their presence turned toward you, their great heads raised and facing out over the ring, as though they are aware of you, as though they see. It is one of the strangest and most powerful feelings the hill gives to be in the company of these vast faceless beings, and to feel unmistakably that you are not unobserved, and there is no menace in it. That is the wonder. These are not fearsome watchers, not judges, not threats. Their gaze, if we can call it that, is calm and patient and somehow gentle, the gaze of something that has stood here 12,000 years, that has seen everything and been troubled by nothing, that holds you for a moment in its vast, slow attention, and finds you simply acceptable, present, here, enough. We spend so much of our lives feeling watched in the other way, judged, measured, found wanting by other people, by the world, by the harsh voices in our own heads. And here are these great old beings whose gaze asks nothing, judges nothing, wants nothing from you at all, that simply, patiently, kindly regard you the way an old tree might, or a mountain, or the stars. To be seen like that, without judgment, without demand, is a rare and healing thing. It is a kind of blessing offered freely by things that have long forgotten how to want. Let them look at you now in the dark, the great faceless beings with their calm and ancient and gentle regard. You do not have to be anything for them. You do not have to prove anything or fix anything or be better than you are. They have watched 12,000 years of human beings in all their striving and suffering, and their gaze has only ever been patient. Let yourself be held in that patient gaze, exactly as you are, and rest. You are seen, and it is kind. Rest. The builders are nameless, all of them, forever. But nameless is not the same as unreal. So let us, for a gentle while, give a life back to one of them. Imagine, softly, one family among the thousands who came to the hill, so that they are not just a puzzle, but people, the way you are people. Imagine a woman, then, 12,000 years ago, who came to the hill as a small girl, carried on her mother's hip up the long road, in the season of the great gathering. Imagine her wide eyes as she first saw the great beings rising against the sky, and the crowds, and the fires. Imagine her growing up with the hill woven through her whole life, coming back each season, learning the songs, learning which animal spirit was which, watching the raising of a new great one when she was young, and feeling the roar of the crowd go through her like her own heartbeat. Imagine her falling in love at a gathering, as surely so many did meeting someone from a distant band, the way you could only meet someone from a distant band at the hill, where all the scattered people came together. Imagine her own children carried up the long road on her hip one day, and their wide eyes at the great beings, and the whole thing turning generation to generation. The hill holding her family together across the years the way it held the whole far-flung people together. And imagine her old at the last, one of the elders now, sitting in the warm part of the day, watching the young ones the way the very old watch the young, and telling them, perhaps, the old stories, the names of the great beings, the meaning of the carved creatures, all the things we would give anything to hear and never will. And then imagine her gone in time and honored, her skull perhaps kept and tended, her spirit joined in the belief of her people to the great company gathered on the hill. She never existed, this particular woman, and yet someone exactly like her did, thousands of someones, each with a whole life as real and as full as yours, lived out around that hill, and every one of them now nameless, faceless, lost. Let her stand for all of them tonight, a real human life, loved and lived and ended in the shadow of the great stones. They were people, they were us. Rest among them, among the thousands of real vanished lives, and let your own life rest gently beside theirs, in the long kind company of all who have lived and been forgotten and mattered anyway. Rest. Let us rest near the end now, in the world the people of the hill actually lived in, not the temple, but the wide living country all around it, because it was a generous world, an abundant one, and there is deep peace in imagining it. Picture that country as it was 12,000 years ago, before the plow and the herd remade it. Rolling hills, green and gold with the seasons. Wild grasses heavy with grain, standing in dense stands on the slopes, so thick a family could gather food for a season in a few weeks. Great herds of gazelle flowing across the land in their migrations, and wild cattle and boar and deer. Rivers running clear, woods along the water thick with fruit and nuts and birds, springs. A land in that age of extraordinary richness, one of the most generous landscapes our kind has ever lived in. These people were not scraping by. The land gave, and they knew exactly how to receive it, every plant that fed them, every animal and its ways, every season and what it brought. They lived inside a deep, intimate, patient knowledge of a world that fed them freely. They were not at war with nature. They were held by it as a child is held, in a great generous abundance that asked only that they know it well and take it gratefully. We have gained so much and lost that. We have forgotten what it is to be simply held by a generous world, to trust that the land will give, that the herds will come, that the grain will stand ripe on the hills. We have made our own abundance and our own anxieties, and lost the old deep ease of belonging to a world that provides. But some memory of it remains in us, and stirs when we walk in wild places, and feel for a moment held again by something vast and green and giving. Let the generous world hold you tonight. Imagine that rich rolling country, green and gold under the great sky, the herds flowing across it, the grain heavy on the slopes, the springs running clear, a whole abundant living world, cradling the people of the hill, providing freely everything they needed. Lie down in that generous world the way they did, held and fed and safe in the lap of a giving earth, and let its old deep ease become your ease. You are held by something vast and kind. You always were. Rest. Here is a strange and gentle thought to turn over near the end, a mirror held the other way. We have spent the whole night looking back at them, the people of the hill, wondering at them across 12,000 years. But what if they could look forward at us? What would they make of the world their hill began? Imagine one of them, the woman we dreamed, perhaps, or the carver of the fox, somehow able to see across all that time to now. To your world, what would astonish them? The cities of glass and light, surely larger than anything in their dreams. The machines, the speed, the billions of us, where their whole world held perhaps a few million souls scattered thin across the earth. The knowledge that we know the age of their hill to the century, that we can read the stone tools they left, that we have walked on the moon that hung over their gatherings. But I think if they could truly see us, what would move them most would not be the machines or the cities. It would be that we still gather, that we still build great things for reasons beyond survival, that we still bury our dead with love and raise monuments to them and climb to high places to reach for the sacred, that we still on quiet nights lie in the dark and wonder at the vastness, exactly as they did under the same stars. They would see across all that distance and all that change the same creature they were still reaching, still building, still gathering around the fire against the dark. And I think that would comfort them as it comforts us. We did not become something else. We became more of what we already were. And I think, too, they would be glad to be remembered. Not by name, they never expected that, never had names to remember. But glad that their hill was found and woken and understood. Glad that someone, 12,000 years on, stood among their great beings and felt the wonder they built them to inspire. Glad that the thing they poured their lives into was not, after all, lost. To be understood across such a gulf of time, to have your deepest work reach a stranger in a world you could never imagine, and move them is a kind of immortality finer than any name. So let this be a meeting tonight across the abyss of time, you, looking back at them with wonder, and they, in your imagination, looking forward at you with recognition. Two ends of one long human story, gazing at each other across 12,000 years and finding on both sides the same reaching heart. You are the answer to their hoping. They are the root of your being. Rest in that meeting, that recognition, that long, kind, mutual gaze across all of time. Rest. And so we come gently to the end of the long night, and to the one thing above all others that Göbekli Tepe leaves us with, a golden thread, unbroken, running from that hill all the way to this room, to this moment, to you. Follow it once more slowly as your eyes grow heavy. It begins on a bare hill 12,000 years ago, with hunters who gathered around something holy and raised great stone beings for love. From that gathering came, perhaps, the taming of the grain. From the grain came the farms. From the farms came the villages and the towns and the first cities and the writing and the law and the wheel and the ship, and every civilization that has ever risen and fallen across all the long roar of history. From all of that came the world you were born into. And from that world came you here now in the dark, at the far bright end of the thread. And the thread is not only made of farms and cities, it is made of something finer. It is the thread of the reaching itself, the hunger to gather around something sacred, to build beyond mere survival, to honor the dead, to wonder at the stars, to make beautiful things with patient hands for love and not for use. That reaching began as far as we can see on the hill, and it never stopped. It runs unbroken through every temple and cathedral and song and story our kind has ever made, all the way down to a person lying in the dark tonight, reaching in their own quiet way for peace, for rest, for something larger than the day just ended. You are not separate from the people of the hill. You are the living end of their thread. The same hands, the same heart, the same reaching. When you wonder, they wonder in you. When you gather with those you love, they're gathering lives again. When you make something beautiful for no reason but love, the carver of the fox carves again through you. Nothing they were has been lost. It flows unbroken down all the ages into you tonight. Hold the thread as you drift golden, unbroken, running back through all of time to a bare hill and a ring of great stone beings under the stars. You are held by it. You are part of it. You always were. And you can let go now and rest, and the thread will hold, the way it has held for 12,000 years, and carry what you are gently onward into the dark and into whatever mornings are still to come. Rest. So let it go now, all of it. The hill and the great stone beings and the carved foxes and the long sleep and the waking. Let them sink gently back into the deep earth of the past where they have always waited, and let the wind close over the hill once more and let it rest, the way it has rested for so long, the way you are about to rest now. Thank you for climbing the hill with me tonight and for going all the way down into what was buried there. If you drifted off somewhere among the great stones, or on the long road to the gathering, or in the firelit ring in the deep old night, then it worked, and I am glad, and you needed no ending. And if you are still here at the very last, then let these be the words you carry down. You come from people who moved mountains for love, before they had any reason to but wonder. That is what you are made of. That reaching is your inheritance. And tonight you may set it down and simply rest, held by the same dark that has held our kind since the very first fire. There is another buried thing on another hill in another land, waiting in the next Codex. Another lost world for another night, but not now. Now there is only this, the quiet room, the soft dark, the great being sleeping in the earth, and you safe and small and kept and finally completely at rest. Let your breath go long and slow and easy, and let go. You were always this. You always will be. Sleep now. The hill will keep its watch.